Welcome to Mary Beth Doyle. I'm Amy and I'm the crew leader at Natural Area Preservation. Here at NAP, our mission is to protect and restore Ann Arbor's natural areas and to foster an environmental ethic amongst its citizens. With COVID-19, we can't lead our regular nature walks and work days, but I hope that this virtual tour of Mary Beth Doyle can inspire some environmental ethic in you. So some of my favorite plants here in Mary Beth Doyle are our spring ephemerals. They come up before the canopy has fully leafed out, and they do most of their energy production and their reproduction during a time when most other plants are dormant. It's a hard time to be a plant in the early spring. Not only can the cold temperatures damage your cells, but it's also really difficult for plants to take up water when the ground temperatures are low, and nutrient availability is also limited due to the reduction in chemical reactions. When it gets cold, even chemistry slows down. So spring ephemerals get around this in a pretty amazing way. They form a mutually beneficial relationship with the fungus in the soil called mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae are the threads that link many of our plants together underground, and they're the water and nutrient collection system that plants wish they could build. Fungus is really good at establishing a huge network of underground mycorrhizae to collect water and nutrients, and the plants are really good at making food out of water, light, and air, so they collaborate. Mycorrhizal associations are essential for lots of our native plants to thrive. From our little trout lily to the towering oak trees, they all depend on mycorrhizae. So the word ephemeral means short-lived. And while these plants may appear short-lived at first, you really only see them in April, May, some of June, they are anything but. A colony, an average colony of trout lily is like 150 years old, and some are over 1,000 years old in old undisturbed forests. So anything that can have a colony persist for 1,000 years, I don't think I would call it short-lived. But they are short-lived in the sense that we only get to see them for a short duration of the year. So we should appreciate them while we have them. Trout lily are have a gorgeous flower that comes in white and yellow, and right here we have the white variety. I really love their modest, downturned flowers because they tempt you to get down on the ground with them, where you notice so much more about the forest than you would from up high. Hey, I thought we might not find one of these today, but I got our yellow trout lily. So I showed you our white trout lily with their beautiful white petals, and here is an example of what the yellow variety looks like. So I found a nice big patch of Virginia Waterleaf. This is a really cool plant because it has these water spots on its leaves. Here, I'll try to find some in the sun. See if you can see that they have like these light colored spots on the leaves that look like watermarks that you would have maybe on a piece of paper. And something I love about these plants is the way they have beautiful purple flowers that look like fireworks. And I think when you get a big patch like this and it really carpets the ground, you can get a really nice show of those flowers, and the bees love them too. Just a couple other things that are growing here with Virginia Waterleaf. We have some early Meadow Rue. See these little leaflets that are mostly divided into 3 leaflets and then 3 lobes, and then a little bit of extra lobing after that. And these plants are going to have cute little flowers that have like the stamens on these flowers, like the male parts, they dangle like a tassel, and I think they look really cute. I love the way that they don't really have petals, but they still manage to have a really great show. I mean, they have petals you can barely see, but they have gorgeous flowers just because they're stamens just dangle. And you have male plants and female plants with this one, so not all of them are going to have those cute little stamens, but I think they all have cute flowers, even though the petals are sort of diminished. Look at this gorgeous little carpet of May apples. I think they look like a miniature tropical forest, or like a fantasy forest, maybe like little truffula trees or something like that, like a Dr. Seuss thing. They're like little umbrellas all over the forest floor. They're so charming. These are gonna hang out on the forest floor for all through April, May, June, and a little bit into July, but they're gonna start looking really sad in July, and they're gonna be yellow and flecked with brown spots. But that's just how the plants senesce. They don't last all summer. We enjoy them while we can. These plants have gorgeous little flowers that are not ready yet, but they will be soon. They are white with a lot of beautiful yellow stamens, and they just look a lot like apple blossoms. And then their fruit kind of looks like an apple too, so I guess that's where they get the name May apple from. Although the fruits are not ripe in May. Maybe they are there somewhere else, but not here. I don't really recommend the fruits. Actually, I don't recommend foraging unless you're an expert in it at all, or you have a really good guide, or you've done a lot of research. But May apples are poisonous. All parts of the plant, most of the time, are totally poisonous, and you should not eat them. Once the May apples are ripe, they are edible, and I think that's when they're kind of a yellowish color as opposed to the more greenish color. But I've never tried them because I haven't heard that they're super, super delicious compared to like a regular apple, and I'm a little scared to try it. But I really appreciate their gorgeous flowers that are pollinated by bees, although it's mostly a trick. Their flowers are like designed to look like they have a lot of rewards and pollen and stuff, but that's just a trick. They don't really have much in the way of reward for pollinators. Yeah, so mostly they just spread rhizomatically, clonally beneath the ground. So this whole patch is probably just one genetic individual, and then it's just spreading that way. And maybe it'll get some luck reproducing with its flowers, but I don't know, not super likely. So I believe these are our nodding trilliums because of the way the flowers are held underneath the leaves, although we'll definitely know for sure once the flowers open. I think these are really cute flowers, and I think they're white with some pink on them, and they're just so alluring. I love it when plants hide their flowers underneath their leaves, like they're inviting you to get closer and take a better look at them. It's something that a couple species of Trillium will do, and then our May apples will also do. And the flowers aren't there to put on a show for humans. They're there for the plants to reproduce. And so I love it when plants remind us of that by hiding their flowers a little bit. Oh my goodness. Look at this beautiful nodding trillium. It's hidden. I was just saying how I love when plants hide their flowers from us. This is a trillium that's hidden underneath a carpet of May apples. So I had to get really, really up close to find this, but that's why you should really get on your knees when you're in the forest and exploring things. You'll see a lot more things that you didn't know were there. Just going for a jog through the woods is great for when you need to go for some exercise, but when you really want to know what's in the woods around you, just get on your knees and take a closer look. One of our real early spring ephemerals is still blooming. This is our Spring Beauty, and you can see they have these linear leaves that are very smooth, simple, plain, linear leaves. And then there's sort of a loose clump of flowers, sort of like a raceme of flowers up here. And then they have petals that are either white or white and striped with pink, and they can look pretty white like these ones over here, or they can look pretty pink like these ones over here, and they are just a wonderful signal that the wildflowers are finally starting to bloom. I always look for these first because they're a lot more common than the harbinger of spring, especially in our parks. Here we have a single flower left on our wood anemone, our little tiny wood anemone. Look at this beautiful little flower. They're so charming. Normally they would have 5 petals, but one has fallen off. So they have white flowers, cute little centers with lots of, frilly little stamens, and then these beautiful little leaves that are, lots of different leaflets covered in hairs, toothed at the ends, all coming out of a central point down here. So whorled leaves. Each one of these is a leaf. 1 leaf, 2 leaf, 3 leaf, 4 leaf. I found a 4-leaf wood anemone. I'm so lucky. And the leaves have lots of little hairs on them. They're, one of my favorite spring wildflowers, just because of their charming little white flowers. I think they're really cute. Here is our beautiful Trillium grandiflorum, our common Trillium. You can see that there's a carpet of this on the woods around here. It's just awash with Trillium, both sides of the trail. When the Trillium flowers first open up, they're this beautiful, pure white color with these yellow stamens inside. You can really see, and the pistils hidden way down in there. And then as the flowers mature and they eventually start to senesce, they will turn this blush pink color. So when you see Trillium changing from white to pink, you know you have the Trillium grandiflorum, our common Trillium, and you know that those pink flowers are a little bit older, a little bit more getting ready to finish up. Cutleaf toothwort. This is one of our earliest spring wildflowers, and it gets its name from its roots. They kind of resemble teeth. I haven't seen them because I don't dig up wildflowers. You can identify this one, though, by its deeply lobed leaves that radiate out from a central point. This plant belongs to the mustard family, and so it's got 4 petals, and I've read that it's edible and sort of spicy tasting, although you shouldn't just snack on our wildflowers. We want to have lots of wildflowers for everyone to enjoy. And besides, we have plenty of garlic mustard. Everyone wants to know what these yellow flowers are. I'm pretty sure they're bristly buttercups, Ranunculus hispidus. Their petals are super shiny, and they're a little bit translucent towards the middle. They have little nectar lines, little guides that guide the bees towards the middle of the plant. I've seen lots of little bees on them. Native bees love these. They grow in our wet areas. Oh, there's a little bee right now. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's bristly buttercup. Not 100% sure. There's a lot of buttercups, and a lot of them look real similar. Wild geranium. Wild geranium is coming soon. We will have wild geranium any day now. You can see the buds hiding just underneath the leaves. Those are going to make some beautiful 5-petaled purple flowers, and then we're going to have a carpet of wild geranium blooming along with our Virginia waterleaf, and it's going to look great. I'm so excited for it. Even after the spring ephemerals are done, the wildflower show in Mary Beth Doyle does not come to an end. That's for sure. You might know geraniums as those annuals that you buy in the garden center. Those are not geraniums anymore. Carl Linnaeus was like, we're going to make all of these plants geraniums together. And that was wrong. They are different genuses. So the annuals that you know are the pelargoniums, and those were separated from geraniums in 1789, and now the real geraniums are these perennial plants that are native here, and then they have the 5 petals, and then their fruits turn into like a crane's bill type structure, so that's where they get their other common name, crane's bills. Hey! I think this might be one of the very first geranium flowers that has bloomed. Look at that. I'm so glad I get to show you. See how they have those 5 delicate purple flowers, sort of a purplish, pinkish colors. You get a variety, and then they're whiter towards the center. And then once they're ready to make seeds, they'll be sort of a crane bill shape to them. So you should definitely consider adding some wild geraniums. A great perennial ground cover for part shade or shade, medium wet to wet areas. Add that to your garden. Feed the bees. Here is one of my favorite wildflowers, bloodroot, or Sanguinaria canadensis. It gets its name sanguinaria from the word sanguine, which has 2 meanings, friendly and bloody. So bloodroot gets its name from the red sap, mostly found in its roots, but also in its stems and its leaves. I think it's reddest in the roots and more orangey colored higher up in the plant. I think bloodroot is pretty friendly too, though. Not only does it have a symbiosis with the mycorrhizae I talked about earlier, but it has a cool relationship with ants. Myrmecoccary describes a seed dispersal strategy that relies on ants. So bloodroot and many other spring ephemerals have these little handles on their seeds for the ants to grab and eat. And they're made out of a fatty tissue that emits a smell that attracts the ants. Those are called eliosomes. Eliasomes, eliosomes. So the ants collect the seeds and they bring them into their underground colonies. After the eliosomes are eaten, the seeds are taken to a chamber where the ants put their trash. These chambers are great places for the seeds to germinate because they're protected and nutrient rich. Using ants to distribute your seeds could seem like a really good strategy at first, but it does have its downsides. Ants aren't likely to cross large barriers, so they're not likely to bring the seeds really more than 2.4 meters was the average I read in a study. So across a road, around a river, or a lake isn't likely to happen. So when habitats are fragmented into small little parcels, ant-dispersed plants don't have a good way to move their seeds from one habitat to the next, so it can be hard to establish or restart a colony across the street. Also, did you know that there are invasive ants? Invasive ants can go through an environment and eliminate the native ants that have relationships with local plants. If the seed dispersers go locally extinct, then the ants that rely on them will be crowded out by their own offspring, unable to spread more than a few inches from their parents. We haven't seen that effect so far here, but it is something we need to look out for. You could become a citizen scientist and start looking at the ants, learning to identify them, and reporting them on iNaturalist. And you can check out the City Nature Challenge to learn more about how you can help like that. Bloodroot has really awesome leaves, and some people mistake them from garlic mustard because they are sort of rounded with a circle cut out here in the middle and then wavy edges. But bloodroot is divided into lobes, especially at the top. There are these little sinuses that cut the leaf into several different lobes, and so you can always see several different lobes. Also, look how big and fleshy the stem is. It's hairless. It's really fleshy feeling, and it's much larger than garlic mustard. And when you pull it, you're going to see that orange or red sap. And so, of course, if you see that, stop pulling that plant and look for garlic mustard. Garlic mustard has a really distinctive smell to it. I'm sure you'll be able to find some. So this is a Jack in the Pulpit, and this plant is in the aroid family, so it's closely related to plants like our skunk cabbage, and you might even have some relatives of this plant in your house. So maybe you have Monstera, you like the Swiss cheese plant, or maybe you have pothos, or maybe you have like a peace lily or calla lilies, and all aroids have a pretty similar main structure to their flowers. So they have flowers that are protected by this hood-like thing called a spathe, and this is just a modified leaf. And I love the way that with Jack in the Pulpits you get these cool maroon pinstripes, and every flower has a different degree of those maroon pinstripes, and that having those block the light can help trick the pollinators that would crawl in here. So if you crawl down the tube of the spathe, you'll get to the spadix. So the spadix is this stalk with flowers on it, and down here I can see there's some female flowers, and this plant looks like it's only producing female flowers right now. Sometimes they only produce female flowers, sometimes they only produce male flowers, but even if they produce both at the same time, they're never fertile at the same time. So a pollinator crawling around in there isn't going to accidentally self-pollinate the plant. This plant is really awesome because it tricks the pollinators into doing its work for it. It doesn't have a reward for them, but its male flowers can kind of smell, or it can kind of smell mushroomy, I guess, and that can trick the gnats that might lay their eggs on those mushrooms into crawling around inside that spathe, and they get kind of disoriented by the markings here. So see how there's got that purple color and then the lighter color at the bottom? So that helps to confuse and disorient by making it seem lighter at the base of the spathe than at the top. Especially with the darker purple ones, it really is a prominent effect. And then the gnats inside get all disoriented. They don't know which way is up or down because they use the light to guide them, and they end up crawling down to the bottom. And with male flower structures, the spathe will have a nice little exit hole. But if there's just female flowers, then there's no exit hole, and they might get stuck there for a good long time. Ooh, a cow parsnip! This is a cool plant. See how it is? It is like fuzzy. It's so fuzzy. So soft. Oh, especially when it's so new and young. Oh, this plant is so nice. Some people might be panicking and thinking, oh, this is a giant hogweed and I'm going to get a horrible burn on my hand from touching it. This is actually our cow parsnip. So this is related to, but different from, giant hogweed. It's a native plant. It's really only dangerous if you break the stems, get the sap on your skin, and then leave it in the sun. It's not nearly as bad as the giant hogweed, which is very, very dangerous. And we don't believe that we have any in Washtenaw County. So I'm pretty confident that this is a safe and fuzzy cow parsnip. They are a great plant with beautiful flowers, a big white umbel, which is like kind of like a flat umbrella-shaped group of flowers. Think about like Queen Anne's lace, but bigger and better, because this is a native plant, and I really like this plant. I think it's adorable. I love it when it gets to be like several feet tall. It's when it's really flowering. It can be, I don't know, I think it's like 5 feet tall. Giant hogweed, that's like 13 feet tall. And its leaves are like way more divided, you know, like pinnate, but like way more pinnate. Like instead of just having like, so this is one leaf, and instead of just having like divided into 3 leaflets and then those leaflets divided into lobes, like way more of this dividing into lobes, much toothier looking, just a lot bigger. Just everything more so. And then I think there's a color difference too, maybe in the stem. But yeah. This is cow parsnip. I'm a big fan of cow parsnips. I think they're so enticing with their very soft foliage and their beautiful white flowers. So have you ever gone to a wetland and seen how the surface of the water is covered in like a shiny film and thought, oh, it's so sad that there's pollution putting oil or something on the water here in this natural area? That's actually not what's going on at all. That's what I thought when I was younger, and then I had a teacher tell me that no, this stuff isn't pollution at all. This is the result of an anaerobic bacteria. So anaerobic means that there's no oxygen happening. And so anaerobic bacteria are found in stagnant pools of water like this. And so instead of using oxygen to do their metabolism the way a mammal would or most animals would, they use other chemicals like iron or sulfur or something like that. Other things that are really good at accepting electrons the way oxygen is, but you know, there's no oxygen down there, so they got to use stuff that's less efficient. But then they make this shiny film as a byproduct. You can often find it around iron seeps, you know, when you get those really orange sort of gunky looking springs coming up out of the woods. Those are iron seeps. That's another byproduct of the anaerobic bacteria. And you can tell that this isn't oil because, here, I'll clear some away. See how it moves in like shards? Oil doesn't move in shards. Oil's like blobs. These are shards, like imagine if you had like a foil or something that broke into like lots of little pieces, like gold leaf flakes or something. So this stuff is totally harmless, totally cool, and it's shiny, and it can be rainbowy like oil on a surface of a pond would be, but it's not oil. And then underneath these leaves, there's all sorts of cool stuff. If you have a magnifying glass or a microscope or something, I would encourage you to just pick up some leaves from some mucky water and take a real close look at them. You'll find lots of great stuff in there. There's a lot of mosquito larvae, but there's a lot of other cool stuff in there too. I'm seeing, I think those are Bosmina. Yeah, just little specks darting around in there. I don't think the camera's good enough to show them, but maybe you can see them a little bit. They just look like little specks darting around under the water. Oak trees are fabulous. They are the cornerstones of our forest ecosystems, and without oak trees, a lot of the elements of our ecosystems would just fall apart completely. Oaks evolved millions of years ago, far in the northern latitudes. Then about 40 million years ago, they started to move southwards. As they adapted to different regions and habitats, they split into many, many different species, yet they still retain a lot of common traits that distinguish them as oaks. In Michigan, we have roughly 12 species, depending on how you classify the hybrids. And the oaks, being the most speciose, having the most species, and the most abundant in terms of sheer biomass compared to any other woody group on the continent, they are a really important element of our forest because so much stuff depends on them. There are a lot of plant and animals that depend on them for their, the mycorrhizal associations that the oaks form with the fungus under the soil. The oaks are feeding the fungus, and the fungus is not only feeding the oaks, but the other plants like our spring ephemerals. So those Trillium and those Bloodroot that we all love, they wouldn't be as prolific and as healthy if we didn't have oaks to help nourish the mycorrhizae in the soil. There's some cool parasitic plants like Indian pipes that rely on oak roots entirely. And there are tons of insects that depend on oaks in some way. You can see the interactions between oaks and insects whenever you find a gall. Galls are some sort of modified plant tissue that form as a response to an insect laying an egg in or on a plant. You can find galls all over oak trees. Sometimes they're like little balls of wood on the twigs. Sometimes you find a bright green speckled orb made out of leaf tissue, and sometimes they are a lumpy mass jutting out of the bark. The damage to the tree from the galls is typically minimal. The trees are just fine, but the insects that mature in these modified plant tissues totally depend on them. Many species are species specific, so they can't just switch to another type of tree if their host plant is removed. So we really need to protect our oak trees by keeping our eyes peeled for oak wilt, which is a disease that's beginning to affect oak trees in the area, and we want to keep our eye out and make sure if we find any in Washtenaw County that we stop it as soon as possible. You can help to prevent oak wilt from even occurring in the first place by not pruning or damaging oak trees during the growing season. Only prune oak trees when they're completely dormant, and that way there's less risk that an insect that has the fungus on it will land on the wound and therefore infect that tree with that fungus. White oak trees have bark that does not have a huge discernible pattern on it. It's just sort of a pale gray color. Nothing too fancy looking about it. It's kind of rough in texture. Some white oaks are a lot flakier in their bark than others, especially in burnt hills, but not so much here. Fairly smooth but rough textured. Not huge pieces falling off the way you would with a hickory or like a shagbark hickory. And then behind it, right there, you can see the red oak with the silver stripes going up the trunk. There's so much to see here in Mary Beth Doyle. I hope you'll join me for section 2 coming up shortly. We'll talk about some invasive species that we'd love your help removing. We'll talk about poison ivy and Virginia creeper and how to tell the difference, and we'll find some more cool wildflowers for you guys to geek out about.